Hello, welcome. We are the intern ministers at Community Church of New York in Manhattan.
We are Unitarian Universalists in the process of becoming ordained clergy.
In this podcast, we delve into the life of an intern minister.
We explore the ways our lives and internships intersect and how this is ministerial formation.
I'm Meagan Henry.
I'm Carrie McAvoy. And
we're Rev'ing Up. Hello, friends. Welcome to Rev'ing Up. We're happy to be back again for another episode of our video ministry podcast. And today we are thinking a lot about some responses that we got from the survey that we originally put out around what people would like to hear from intern UU ministers. And when I say UU, I'll just say the whole long name one time, and then we'll probably just say UU for the rest of the show. But Unitarian Universalist interns, and Carrie and I are serving at Community Church here in New York City, and we've been responding to the survey question around what does it feel like, what does it mean, what does it look like to be an intern minister during COVID? How certainly we haven't been intern ministers not during COVID, so we don't really know how it's different, but we can kind of like guess at some of the ways that it's quite different, some of the really obvious ways especially. And we've talked some about this as we've gone along in other episodes, just some of the like logistical things around, worship online and on Zoom instead of in person, and how that's different, and what is it like to have ministerial presence when things are happening on Zoom through a video or just over the phone. And certainly that presents some interesting challenges for us, wouldn't you say, Carrie?
Definitely. Yeah, ministering through Zoom is pretty interesting. Certainly, there have been moments where I have been able to connect very deeply with other people through Zoom, and often, sometimes it just feels like a barrier. The way that the conversation can't flow in the same way as it would if we were in person. The value of being able to see people's body movements or gestures, all of that is much easier in person, and just being able to read the whole room. So there's certainly aspects of the Zoom world that have made it more difficult for me to figure out how to minister effectively. And at the same time, that I know that there are a lot of people who are really enjoying the opportunity to just plug in from their homes. It allows them to kind of balance their church life and their work life a little better. So there's been that aspect as well. Mm-hmm. And certainly, I certainly feel that learning to intern minister with Zoom in a pandemic is much better than it would be without Zoom. So I'm very grateful for the tool.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely grateful for the tool of having Zoom. I was thinking about what it's, one of the things that we have faced coming in as intern ministers during a pandemic is that the pandemic didn't start while we were interning, and it had already started. It was already happening. And here in New York City, the majority of the real devastating death toll happened last spring. So with us coming in the fall, I feel like there's, in some ways it's unspoken, because I just think that it's hard for people to talk about it, but I think that there's just so much sadness, and there's a lot of healing to be done, and also feels like there's a bit of spiritual malaise that is present. Part of it is because people are getting so tired of having to worship on Zoom, or remotely
Mhm.
online, and not being able to lend our voices to a choir of other voices singing all around us, and have um, the feeling of joy and release and comfort that happens when we're in a room together and singing together and praying together, um, murmuring and shifting in our seats, and all of those things that happen when we're together. So there is a mourning happening around that loss, that more than a year of, you know, lost of being together, that is mixed in with the mourning of the loss of life, the mourning of, like, so many things, and the recognition of the way in which the pandemic has unveiled such inequity in our world, in our lives, in our city, in our country, and certainly recognizing the ways in which some of us, maybe I'll speak for myself, at times can feel very helpless. I can feel very helpless sometimes when I look around and I see really horrible things happening around us, and not feeling that I know really what to do.
Mhm.
um and so I think that we came in as interns to a community that's feeling many of those things.
Mhm. Yeah, you mentioned mourning, and I know from personal experience the importance of collective mourning. Like there is something that ritualization, that being together and processing the grief together. I think about people who have lost loved ones during this time, where in-person gatherings have been very difficult. And I know for myself how important it was to gather with other people in that space of loss. And also just the opportunity to really mourn together about the the world that we have lost with the pandemic. This way that we thought the world was um, is no longer and will never be again. And also, like you said, Meagan, it's exposed a lot of what we didn't think was there and is very much there. In New York City, I've seen a lot of suffering from homelessness and so forth. And I'm in Oregon right now, and there's people camping out in tents under every overpass, and it's dire. It's really dire, and that sense of helplessness, that sense of constant anxiety, just whenever I leave the house, I'm wondering, is it safe? Where is it safe to go here? Is it safe to go there? So it's just all of this anxiety and unknowing, and so what I've really tried to do in my ministry, as I learned to minister in a pandemic, is lead with the pastoral approach, um, with a special care towards fostering connection in any Zoom um, area that I'm in. It's like check-ins are super important.
Hmm.
Moments of silence are really important. Lifting up that this is a really, really difficult time, and none of us have gone through it before. So,
Hmm. Yeah, I find that being intentional about having an opening reading for online meetings is really helpful. Just reminding everyone that we're coming together in this space for with intention to be together in spiritual community, even if it's a meeting, right? It's not a meeting of, oh gosh, now I'm not going to think of something that it could be. Um, but I mean, because everything matters right now anyway. I was going to say it's not a meeting of, your book club, but like it is, like the book club is spiritual too, right? Like everything is now.
Mhm. Mhm.
um, so yeah, planning meetings, organizational meetings, staff meetings, committee meetings, board meetings, all of these meetings, and even just simple like touch base and check-in time, having a grounding, opening, reading, and deep breath and a little bit of quiet time, some space, some meditation, sometimes even an extemporaneous prayer, leading something like that like in our internship committee meeting or something like that can it's interesting as like learning to be a minister and being in this learning space, because we come into it as interns. At least I can speak for myself, saying I came into it thinking to myself, this is the only time that I am going to be in this community as an intern minister who is here to learn. And the community sees me that way. I see me that way. And it's such a special gift to be able to have this time with people. And so, yeah, it's COVID, there's a pandemic. So how do we as intern ministers then explore with making the special connections and giving people spiritual grounding and time to process what's going on, working with that, thinking about that, and keeping that in mind even when we're attending meetings, I think is one way to be an intern in this pandemic time.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm really going to miss being able to say, hey, I'm just working on this class project. Can you help? That's a real minister, because it's like, that's the entry. Everyone's like, oh, sure, I'll help you. I'm like, oh, thank you. Yeah. And it's interesting because for some reason, all three of the classes I took this last semester were really overlapping. And all of them talked about emergent strategy, which is, I think it's Adrienne Maree Brown who is really opening up this dialogue. I don't think that she invented it. I think that's Grace Lee Boggs and many who have come before her, but it's a really interesting, a different way of looking at the world. And it comes from this example of a flock of birds flying together. If you've seen the birds where they just kind of swoop around and go in hoops, and they you can see the light as they fly in different directions, and just this concept of shared leadership, or distributed leadership, where you're the premise is that each of the birds is paying attention to their closest neighbors and trusts that what they do is going to be is not going to harm them. So when their neighbors move, they move. And somehow this process leads the whole flock without this hierarchical leadership that we're used to, and that let's face it, has been very prevalent in our congregations. How do we shift to this emergent strategy model as a way of responding to change? And I remember one of my first classes at Meadville, I heard about this, where systems break down is an opportunity. So I really try to keep that in mind. So how do we see this unveiling of more deeper levels of social justice inequities, and where the ways that we were before are we're no longer able to do? How do we see this as an opportunity? And I think as students, we're also in a unique position to kind of really learn about that.
For sure. Yeah, I love that, Carrie. I'll just say as an aside, so that is called a murmuration when birds do that. And starlings are famous for their amazing, massive flock murmurations. And I just love that because my daughter's name is Starling. um, so being an intern minister during COVID and learning what it means to look for the opportunities where systems are breaking down, like you were just saying, I think is a really, it's taking me into something else that we had talked about earlier around um, embracing change as a positive thing, learning to be adaptive as a leader. So responding to the things, the birds around me, I'm adapting to those changes and trading up um, trading up who is leading what and when, and recognizing that we can't all do it alone, is something that's I feel like has become a lot more clear to me during COVID, because if I just can't imagine carrying the weight of all of this, of a whole congregation, of a whole community, of a whole church on the shoulders of one minister who's leading them. Just like we need people there on Sunday morning to turn on the coffee pot, to move the chairs into place, to make sure the hymnals are out, to get the orders of service ready. Just like we need all of those people, we need those people to come together to provide online community as well, and to keep everything going. It's not about just one person who delivers a sermon. That is one of my really big learnings around being, well, like what it means to be a minister, is that I think I had been a little bit sold a lie for a really long time that ministers are like on this pedestal, that they're, they have to be so perfect all the time, that they are perfect all the time, that they are, they're in control, they're doing everything, and so then if something breaks down in the system, like there's no way to catch it, there's no way to adapt, there's no way to hold. And I think that one of the things that I've really learned is the importance of shared leadership, shared community, and in that being able to adapt to changes when they happen, because it's not all just riding on the shoulders of one person, because we're all in it together.
And it's a spiritual growth to grow in one's leadership as well. One of the things that I've really loved about my experience in my home congregation is that I was allowed to grow. I was allowed to take on new roles and learn what spiritual leadership looked like. And that's partly propelled me into the path to ministry. Another thing about adaptive leadership that I'm learning right now, and as students, we're perfectly positioned to leverage this. It's, you try a bunch of, in the midst of change, you try a bunch of different things, because there's no way to know what's going to work, what's going to stick, what isn't. So you just try a bunch of stuff. So community church, for example, we quickly moved the services online, and then we tried a bunch of different programs during the week so that people could be connected in different ways, in spiritual ways, and just talking about stuff and artistic expression, all of these things. So I think that's one of the opportunities of this time, where we don't know what's going to happen. So let's just try a bunch of stuff.
Totally. Yeah. And see what sticks, see what works. And, probably we know that once we start coming back and worshiping in person again, it will be different, and things will have changed. We're not just going to go back to the way things were before. Now so many people know how to use Zoom now. So many people know how to use Google Meets, or whatever the tools are, so that we can potentially include people more regularly in church throughout the week, without people feeling like they can't do it because they can't go to the building. There might be a committee that would really benefit every committee in the congregation would really benefit from having parents with young children on those committees, right? But parents with kids in school, they can't come to like the church on a Wednesday evening for a meeting at 7 for a committee meeting. But if the committee is meeting on Zoom, it opens up more space. It means that more people can attend these things and be involved and become the leaders and participants, as opposed to potentially just feeling like a consumer who shows up on Sunday morning and has something provided for them, right? So there is also the potential for these learnings and the growth that has happened during COVID to bring people into a more collaborative approach, but also feeling more ownership of the community.
Right. Absolutely.
And feeling more valued. And when we go back to worshiping in the sanctuary in person, I bet there's going to still be an online version of that happening in some way, right? So we're going to be recording the services and sending it onto, YouTube or Zoom or whatever it's going to be, so that people who can't come in. Do you like how I said that, sending it to? This is what I think of, like, is the world. It's like, well, we're sending the recording. I don't know what I'm saying, but I think you know what I mean. It'll be streamed or something. So and there are now we also see the value of people who have these technical skills too, who can do that kind of work and make our worship services accessible to people who can't come in person. So I think we'll have some challenges around, well, just because we can make it accessible to people who can't come in person for whatever reason, does that mean then we end up with two classes of people? There's the people who come in person, and then there's the people who are online. And that could create a division, it could create silos. So that'll be a challenge for us to think about from the very beginning, how to keep those silos from forming.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, all of this is a lot. And one of the ways that we, as intern humans in this world and ministers, are able to hold all of these many, many things, is really through intentionally doing what we need to do to care for ourselves, taking time and space for ourselves, figuring out what it is that will nurture us and keep us whole and grounded and able to hold all of the mourning and the healing and the hurt, to hold the uncertainty, to hold the learning that's happening around being in so much change. And always being in that adaptive changing space of thinking about, like, well, how can change, instead of change being a bad thing or change being hard, how can change be a positive? Like, what? So that's a lot for us to be holding. And we encourage our parishioners to take care of themselves, to pray, to have a spiritual practice, come to Sunday morning and be, with us in the spiritual space. So then we often need to be really intentional about reminding ourselves and each other to take care of ourselves, to do things to keep ourselves grounded and in a spiritual space, so that we can hold all of that. And I think that that is a whole nother big topic, which, what do you think? Should we talk about that next week?
Absolutely. I think that's super important to do that, and just envision a leadership model that is sustainable.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I want that vision.
Yes. So this has been fun to talk about this, and we thank you for being with us today. We have a Facebook group. If you go to our YouTube channel, you'll see the link and join our conversation. Please email us at podcast@ccny.org. If you have any comments, questions, this is a conversation. And we are looking forward to you all being with us on May 27th in the evening for our live event. Yay! And more details next time. In the meantime, be well, and we will talk with you soon.
Have a great day. Bye, everyone.
Bye.